Hey everybody, this is Angela Damiani. I'm the CEO of Milwaukee, and this is another amazing episode of Making New Possible. On today's episode, I have the founder of Honeybee Sage Wellness, Angela Mallett, coming to tell us all about her version of creating a portal for higher consciousness. Those are my words, not hers, but she'll get into her big vision for creating the most epic tea house in the city of Milwaukee and an absolute beacon for wellness. I cannot wait to get into this conversation. So, hey, let's just do it. Hi, Angela. How are you doing?
Hello there.
Thank you so much for joining Making New Possible. I really appreciate you being here with me today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I have to tell you, I think Honeybee Sage is maybe the coolest thing in Milwaukee. Like, I feel like I was like late to the party. And then when I
Yeah,
found your spot up on MLK, I was like, okay, this is how I know the city's like arrived, because this is absolutely epic. So I
that's
can't
insane.
wait to like ask you a million questions about it and have you tell me the whole story.
Sure. Okay,
Well,
let's do it.
tell me from the beginning, and for people who don't know, and I don't understand why they don't know, what is it? How would you
Yeah,
describe it? Because I think I know that it's so much more than like a tea shop or a cafe.
absolutely. It's a little piece of heaven on earth. But I am by trade a massage therapist. Always wanted to learn about healing with herbs and nutrition, even through that process of getting my diploma in massage therapy. Honeybee Sage was always kind of lingering in the formative years of me becoming, a professional practitioner and owning or developing my own massage practice. I knew that something like this would come. In fact, on the first day of class, they asked the question, why massage? And I said, I want to have a comprehensive, holistic wellness space at some point. And so
Mm.
Honey Sage is a little bit of that. And so it is an herbal apothecary and tea cafe located on King Drive right here in the city of Milwaukee. It's a beautiful space, and what I love to call it now. We did an interview years back, and the writer coined us a healing cafe, and so that
Mm.
is what I love to call it. But yeah, we're a tea cafe and herbal apothecary, and just a resource hub for wellness products.
I love it. I love it. And my favorite part is that beautiful wall. I mean, it really does feel like an old school apothecary
Yeah,
with all of the whole wall of different teas, herbs, etc. It's
yeah,
absolutely impeccable, and the service is impeccable. I mean, having like a proper tea service with the whole setup feels. I took my nieces there maybe a year ago, and they're at that perfect tea age, right? They're like
yes,
6, 7, 9. You know what I mean? And so to have them feel like so fancy that they each have their
yes,
own little like
yes.
tea tray was like, you're just absolutely ideal in this setting.
Yeah, and I think that's so important for young kids, girls especially, to have those experiences as young people, so
Hmm.
that they know what they can reach for and look towards, as they grow older. They kind of set the tone for themselves as to what their standard is, and I love that Honeybee Sage helps them to feel fancy and important. When we bring over the tea service, that was one of the goals, was to make folks feel like they were welcome in the space, but they were also very much intentionally prepared to have an experience that would elevate them. When they come into the space, and when they leave, they'll be better than they came. So that's the goal for
I
us.
love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard you describe yourself as a professional space holder. And
Yes.
what that harkens for me is actually even in the tea setup, like you have a little timer, which is of
Hmm.
course a suggestion for how long you should wait for the tea to steep.
Hmm.
But I noticed my own inclination receiving that, like how much I feel like in a hurry about it and what a practice it requires for me to just sit and wait for the grains of sand. You know what I mean? To go through and not be in a hurry about enjoying this, to be
Yes.
present in that space. I'm curious, like, what does that mean to you in practice to be a professional space holder? And is my instinct that even the like grains of sand taking through is a part of that for you?
Absolutely. For me, when I was in my massage practice, I actually had the same kind of timekeeper so that I wasn't looking at the clock and anxiously counting down the numbers. The time was just passing and I was able to be present with my client. And so for me, as a curator of such an experience, I still have to be very mindful in my own personal practice to be present in the moment and not anxiously await, the passing of the time, but to really be in the space. So for me, even in knowing that I wanted to create a space like Honeybee Sage, I was talking to a friend one day many years ago, and I told her, you know what, I finally know what I want to be when I grow up. I want to be a professional space holder. And when you say space holder, that, obviously I should coin that a little bit differently, but a curator of space, right? I want
I like that.
be one who, even in my personal presence, curate space where people feel safe, they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel important, and they feel cared for. And so I feel like that's what we've curated in the space that is Honeybee Sage. Like, people come and they, thank you for commenting on the customer service. It's amazing. I love it. We have our gaps every now and then, just like any other business, but I think that we have to, like, our community makes us stay on our toes at this point because we set the bar so high. But I really love that because it keeps us in alignment with our own goals and our own, business model, that we want to be that space where people feel like, even if they don't purchase a cup of tea, they sit down and have a glass of water, or they just sit and cry it out, or think about something that they need to process, that space is there for them to hold them carefully and intentionally while they, this life.
Yeah, I think that's the word that resonates most for me, is intentional. Everything about the space and the business feels very intentional. I'm curious if you could take me back to what drew you to this healing work and herbal medicine. Like, was there a moment that set you down this path?
So, yes, great question. So, a couple things about me. I'm a Milwaukee native, was born and raised here till 7, moved to Mississippi, country, dirt, dark roads of Kosciuszko, Mississippi. When I was 7 years old, my dad moved my brother and I, our family, to Mississippi, where he and my mom are both from. And I just saw folks reaching for things in the kitchen cabinet and other places, not just going to the pharmacy. Here in Milwaukee, we could hop down to Walgreens, quickly. But I saw different things. My grandmother, I remember being a kid and having an ear infection, and she's like, baby, just put some sweet oil in that baby's ear. So sweet oil is olive oil, and it's very soothing, very healing for the inner ear. And so things like that really inspired me to know that there was something outside of allopathic medicine that was available to us. And so I really wanted to lean into that. And I wish at the time, I was definitely very well influenced by, those remedies that were shared in my childhood. But most kids, we're running in and out. We're not necessarily really paying attention. But I think those things planted a seed, right? And then at 15, I had a pretty traumatic experience. I had an ovarian cyst that had grown the size of a 5-month-old fetus. So my little belly was protruding. It was interesting, and it was very much an emergency situation. My mom or I, we didn't know it was there. Ended up in the emergency room, and my experience in the emergency room was kind of traumatic. And I think just from that point and different experiences within medicine, I wanted to find other things, other ways to avoid poor health, to maintain good health, and to find a way to balance the in-betweens. And so I, from a very early age, relatively speaking, early teens, started to look into herbal medicine as my own personal practice for healing. Of course, I do find that there is value. I like to be very clear about the fact that there is value in allopathic medicine and the technologies that are available to us today. At the same time, I think when we're talking about maintaining, like, I have a little bit of a sore throat today. I don't need an antibiotic at this moment, right? This cup of tea is soothing me perfectly fine, and it'll probably get me through this little bit of a storm, right? So it's just been a personal practice, and then as I was learning things for myself, began to become more confident with sharing that with other people, and so I became what's considered a community herbalist. Yeah.
That's so interesting to me that you had the origins even from when you were little. And of course, I think anyone that's had a negative experience in maybe traditional medicine tends to reach for other modalities. I think
Yeah.
that's sort of like a natural outgrowth to just sort of say, well, what else is there? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because it doesn't seem like something I can really depend on. And even when I've been through very traditional protocols, the number of times that a doctor has said like, well, we don't really know. I mean, I feel like sort of stunned by that. You know what I mean? Like, what do
Yes.
you mean you don't know?
Well, we're going to
Not
give
my
you
word.
this medication. Just
You know what I
let's
mean? Like,
try
we
this,
don't really,
right?
let's just try it, which, you know what I mean? I feel like because they're in a white lab coat and you're in a very clinical setting, you
Yes.
expect that it's going to work. And of course, like we are multi-dimensional beings.
Yeah.
And there are lots of different inputs and outputs that have to,
Sure.
can help us get well.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like you have worn a lot of hats,
Yeah.
massage therapist, Reiki
Yeah.
healer, doula, herbalist, more. What's the like through line with all of those for you? Like how are they connected for you? Or are they not? Do you have them distinctly compartmentalized?
No. I feel like they all the through line is love. So my very very first business, I was thrust into entrepreneurship. I say that because it came after a layoff back in 2009, and it wasn't Honeybee Sage, it wasn't massage, it wasn't any of those things. But I had said in 2008, working in a classroom, excuse me, and kind of growing exhausted with the traditional education kind of pathway. I wasn't finding that. A friend of mine and I at the time, she was a teacher, I was a paraprofessional, and we were finding that the system wasn't a space where we felt like we could be the most effective. And so we both, in her classroom at the end of the year, declared that we were going to become entrepreneurs. She had a craft. She is a crochet artist, and she's also a hairstylist. So that summer, dove right into that. I didn't have anything. I didn't have any offerings or anything like that. And so I had no idea like what I was going to offer. But the next summer, I actually moved to a different position as a youth program coordinator for a nonprofit in the city. And economic downturn came a little bit shortly after, well, like a year after I took that position, and I was laid off. I was inspired standing on the street one day. Not standing, driving down the street. There was a young man standing on the street, and he, by all means, stereotypically looked like, a gangster. Like hoodie, saggy pants, but the stereotype, right? Was holding a baby in his arm, holding another baby by the hand. He looked very nurturing in that moment, and I decided in that moment, that's my mission, to spread love. That's it. 2008, around the time that I kind of declared I'd become an entrepreneur, having no idea what path I would take towards that. Fell out towards the end of 2009. I kind of lost my religion, if you will. Still very much spiritually grounded. I was raised in Christianity, so that's still foundational for me. But I just decided that love was going to be my religion, because it doesn't separate you from anybody. And so even in the space that we curated in Honeybee Sage, I'm always so amazed. I still stand in awe and humility when I observe the different types of people coming in and out of our doors and sitting at the bar together, or sharing a table, or the tables are kind of close, right? So they're really close together on a church pew intentionally, right? And they're talking about what tea the other person has in there. So for me, curating a space, being a person that hopefully my presence is a space where people feel love, where they experience God, authentic, divine love in human form. I think that's the through line for me. That's the long story.
I love that. I love that so much. We have a very similar timeline, to be honest with you. I started my first business in 2009. I also lost my religion that year too.
Okay.
And that's
was going on
interesting.
in
Maybe there was like
2009?
I don't know, something in the ether, I guess. Maybe we were all just disillusioned by the fallibility of all the institutions that
Yeah.
promised us things would be different.
Yeah.
That's really, really amazing. And I have felt it when I'm in your space, and I really appreciate like the closeness of all of it. You know what I mean? Sitting at those little bistro tables and being right next to other people. It feels like you're in Europe. You know what I mean? Like that sort of like grand cafe sensation.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's enough spaces, not just in Milwaukee, but in the United States, where you can have that sort of serendipitous run in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's very easy to go to a much larger space and not have to even make eye contact with people, let
Yeah.
alone like sit next to them and actually engage with them. I'm curious, as a business, obviously you sell tea accoutrement, etc., but you're just as much like a gathering space as you
Yes.
are a business.
Yes.
What kind of community have you seen form around that space? I mean, you've created a platform for people to convene, and being a person who works in the creation of space through Milwaukee, and honestly, I like to think of myself as a platform artist.
Yeah.
I'm always sort of mesmerized about how you can have a very intentional intention for a space, but then the community will fill in the color for you. You know what I mean?
Yes. I
And
do
it,
know
it
what
is
you mean.
always sort of surprising, like
Yeah.
maybe in spite of what you originally intended.
Yeah, so when I came home to open Honeybee Sage, I said to myself that I would be here for 3 years, young, ambitious entrepreneur. I'm gonna get this business settled, and I'm gonna go back out into the world, and I'm gonna curate community conversations with white women and black women around racial reconciliation. That was supposed to happen if I opened in 2018, 2021. I should have been out on the road, and so the community that I've seen, I bring that up because one of my goals in establishing Honeybee Sage on King Drive, and that was my goal even before we got our humble beginnings in the Sherman Phoenix, which was by the way very divinely orchestrated. Like, that path was so divine. But landing back on King Drive was a dream come true, pun intended. And my goal in being on King Drive was that I thought, it's one of those railroad tracks in the city. Obviously, Milwaukee, unfortunately, has, we have the stigma that, we're notorious for being one of the most racially segregated cities in America. And I feel like King Drive is, again, one of those lines in the same. Across the street from Honeybee Sage is Brewers Hill. We're on the side of
That's a
Howard
zipper,
Park.
really.
Yeah. Yeah, we're on the side of Howard Park. You go a few blocks north, you're in Harambe, and then you go a few blocks south, you're downtown. And right 2 blocks south of us, on the intersection of Walnut and King Drive, King Drive used to turn into Old World Third. Walnut still turns into Pleasant. So there's some still, to me, obvious lines of delineate. There's some separation there. And so for me, what I wanted to create in Honeybee Sage was an intersection of health and wellness. Like, when you're sick, when you're ailing, if you're there are few people, I think, in the world who are so ignorant that if they're ailing, that they would allow their ideas about somebody's sexuality, somebody's race, somebody's culture, those things to separate them if they needed help. And so for me, the community has helped. They've responded. I responded to the call to create the space, but the community has filled that in. I love how you said, they color in the spaces, and they really have done that. And I just, again, sometimes I'll sit outside the cafe and I'll just observe the different people coming in and out. I'll come in the cafe and I'll see very different people, seemingly, visually sitting together and talking. My staff interacting. Somebody told me, and I forgot the name of. She said something. I forget the name, but she was just saying how colorful my staff looks. We took a picture, and she's like, "It's amazing how that shows up." But I feel like, Milwaukee has, within Honeybee Sage, realized something that I think we're all hoping for, in that space to be seen, be different, and be appreciated for our differences. We don't have to ignore our differences or act like they don't exist. We just have to be accepting of one another in a way that allows every one of us to thrive and be happy and be in joy and experience good things in life. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All over a cup of tea.
Yeah.
It's
All over
really, it's really magnificent. So I've heard you say that Honeybee Sage is a resource for homegrown healers.
Yeah.
What does that phrase mean?
So our tagline is that we're a global community of homegrown healers. And so I am not a certified herbalist. And
Sure.
I love to like tell people that, because you mentioned earlier, like the kind of the white coat,
Mhm.
philosophy. When we show up at the doctor's office, a lot of us turn off all our sensory, all of the intuition that's flowing within us, to surrender ourselves to the doctor and say, this is what I'm experiencing. Tell me what's wrong. And nobody knows better what's going on in your body and in your human experience than you. No, nobody. Even as a
Right.
massage therapist, I think Hippocrates is quoted as saying something like, massage is a great place to start if you want to get into medicine, because we're touching places that some people's intimate partners don't touch. We're probably
Mhm.
touching everything except for the places that they do, right? And so you're actually feeling things, whether that's a physical manifestation, energetically, tension, stress. And so I feel like we have created, the goal is to get folks in tune with their bodies. One of my favorite scriptures is when Jesus told the disciples, like, the kingdom of God is within you. And so I
Mhm.
say that to people often, that you know more intuitively about your health and your wellness experience than I do intellectually. And
Sure.
anybody who stands outside of your body, outside of your experience, and tells you that they know better than you know, or can sense if you tune in, like, what's going on with you. You may not be able to put a clinical name or a term with it. You may not be able to diagnose or treat it without some insight or some, a mirror kind of reflecting back to you, but that's what we've become, is a space where we kind of hold up the mirror and say, hey, okay, these are the things that you're discussing, that you're feeling. These herbs have been here since the beginning of time, before mankind, if we honor the creation story, right? And there are things here that are available for you, and I can tell you how folks have used them in the past, or what we think it was a creator's intention on how they can help us find balance in our bodies. And I'm promoting wellness. I'm not treating disease.
Sure.
And
Sure.
so the homegrown healer piece is, like, within yourself. I am, again, I do not discount the value of the information that we receive from allopathic medicine and traditional Western medicine, but I do find that we can be more intuitively inclined to what our bodies need to heal, if we just have the space to acknowledge what we're experiencing, and have somebody who's knowledgeable to kind of point us in the direction of some things that might help the health of, a particular organ or system, or what have you. Yeah.
That's making me think is I just feel like we don't, as a society, talk about like consciousness in the same way. And what
Yeah.
you're describing is really like giving people permission to listen to their own bodies. But in
Yes.
order to do that, you have to be self-conscious. And I
Yes.
wonder actually, like the way you're describing how you see all your guests, you
Hmm.
know what I mean? And you give them a chance to like slow down
Yeah.
and just sit still with their tea timer, right?
Hmm.
Like you're giving them a portal, really, to
Yes.
be more in touch
Yes.
with their inner world so
Hmm.
that they can get to all the things you're talking about, which is like,
Yes.
no, actually, I've been having this ache for a while. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Whatever it is. And of
Yeah.
course, you have a myriad of different herbs at your
Yeah.
disposal that may help with those, but you can't even really offer that to someone unless they are more conscious. And so I feel like yeah, I like thinking about this as like a portal for someone's entry into their own elevated consciousness.
I love that, and I'm gonna adopt that as a new descriptor for Honeybee Sage, because it is exactly that. I tell people that, the hospital, sometimes people just need space and quiet. When
Hmm.
I was in Nashville I lived there for 6 years prior to coming home and building Honeybee Sage. And I spent so much time in the woods hiking, just so much. In fact, the first time that I went hiking in Nashville, I was working at Lane Bryant as a part-time job, and I went into work, and my boss was like, did you come in here high? And I'm like, no, I've just been hiking all day, I'm elevated, just
Yeah.
from nature. And I think the space that is
So
created, like, that is where God lives, in the quiet
funny.
space moments of pause that we take, spirit, creator, whatever you like to call it, consciousness, right? That
Mhm.
is where that lives when we get quiet, ground ourselves in the moment. We can hear things that we've been researching and trying to discover for months and months and years. If you just get a moment where you can just, in a safe environment, get
Mhm.
quiet, get still. Like the downloads that can happen are amazing, and I've experienced that myself. I had an experience. I was eating mints at Massage Envy, and I was just like, before, freshening my breath, we gave them the guests, and they're the little soft mints that your granny kept in her purse, right? And
Okay.
it's a pad of sugar, really. And so at the end of the night, I'd be terribly, terribly sleepy. And I'm like, God, what's happening? Like, why am I so sleepy at the end of the shift? And I went to sleep one night and I dreamt about cinnamon. And I was like, cinnamon? Cinnamon? Why did I dream about cinnamon? Cinnamon helps to regulate blood sugar. I've been popping these mints. I stopped popping the mints. I stopped having the spikes and drops,
Mhm.
right? That sleep, that moment, that asking the question, taking the moment to listen, the answer came. And I think
Mhm.
we all have that ability when we intentionally get still, get quiet in a safe space. We can hear more clearly the intuition, the inner guidance that's available to us all the time. Yeah.
That's really, really lovely. Yeah, I'm proud of you for creating this. Like I think because some people might just go, because they get invited to meet there, but that
Yeah.
this is like ideally like a place for people to start that journey.
Yes.
Because I think what you're
Yeah.
describing is a lifetime of practice. And for
Yes.
anyone that's listening to this, they might even be like a little intimidated, like, well, how the
Yeah.
hell would I even start something like that? You know what I mean? And it's hard and it requires you to be vigilant
Yes.
to yourself, but
Yeah.
you're right. It's just a little bit of quiet, sitting
Just
still,
a little
figuring
bit.
out what you need. I actually came into work today and I sat down and I was feeling really agitated. And I
Mhm.
asked myself, like, why am I feeling agitated? I
Yeah.
don't have anything really stressful happening. And I just couldn't quite like come up with an answer. So I was like, all right, before I like get into my email, I'm just going to go sweep and wash the floor in the office. Like I'm going to
Yes.
do something physical, but I
Yeah.
know that I self-regulate by doing an act, but two things. One, moving my body, and the
Mhm.
space is big enough that like you can get a little bit of a sweat on trying to like do all that
Yeah.
quickly. But then two, by doing something that has like a start, a middle, and an end. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
and so like, but I have learned that's like a ritual for me, a
Yeah.
micro ritual. You know what I mean? That like, yeah, okay, sweeping the floors doesn't always sound like, oh, I think some people think like wellness, like, oh, I have to put a face mask on. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's something like
Yeah.
that, but it's not always like that. Like what will make you feel well in this moment? And I felt like completely restarted. Like I could
Yeah.
6 minutes later sit down and felt like, oh yeah, that was the reboot I needed. I just
Yeah.
needed to like reset.
Yeah.
I'm
So in
curious,
the
do you have
cafe,
any like
yeah, go ahead.
do you have
No.
rituals that you practice every day? You know what I mean? Because obviously you create this space for everyone else, but like how do
Yeah.
you keep, filling your own well?
Yeah, I will say that I like I'm always I'm not always, but I try to my intention is to be honest. And there are times, where I am so outwardly focused that I do skip on rituals. But for me, the practice of putting water in my tea kettle, turning the stove on, letting it come to that whistle, right? While my water is boiling, I'm preparing my tea. I'm getting my cup ready. Just taking that moment. And for me, I like to check out a bit. What you did to me is what I describe as checking out to tune in, right? When
Mm-hmm.
you're less focused on the problem and you're not on that wavelength anymore, the solution has an opportunity to kind of float in. And I think
Mm-hmm.
going back to the conversation about Honeybee Sage becoming a portal or being a portal, it's that the tea is set in front of you. You're taught how to engage the process, take the strainer out. Watch the saying, take the strainer out. Add your honey. That's kind of a beautiful practice to watch. And then the sound of stirring your tea, sitting there, letting it cool, and then now all of the things that I have a plaque on my wall that says healing is a practice of pause. It was a gift from a friend years ago. And I think for me, when I find myself doing too much externally, the pause, the shower, the cup of tea, the 5 moments of stillness. I'm not going to tell you that I have like a religious meditation practice, although I've been felt a personal conviction for many years to really dive more deeply into that. In fact, now I'm feeling even greater conviction because I feel like Honeybee Sage has kind of, we've been on a bit of an ascent, and I feel like we're like at this plateau that can sometimes feel like you're regressing, but then you're there to get used to kind of a new normal before you start to
Go
ascend
on to the next
again.
thing.
And or sometimes that can look like what feels like a regress, but ultimately you're going to be on the up at some point. And so
Well, it is always
I
so interesting when you actually achieve a dream. You know what I mean? I feel like I've had multiple points in my life where I think, all right, this next hurdle will be the biggest thing we've ever done.
yeah.
And when you actually materialize it, realizing like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
Now what's next? You know what I mean? Like there is a little bit of I hear that. It feels like a plateau or even maybe like a letdown.
Yes.
So tell me, the reason I reached out to you because I saw you putting a dream out there into the ether,
Yeah.
wanting to do some sort of expansion. How do
Yeah.
you think about the future? Like, what feels exciting? What feels possible right now? I wanna know, where are you going next?
Thank you. It's interesting because I told you I find myself in an interesting space right now where I do feel like I am feeling called or led to kind of really do some very intentional pausing. When you share your vision with folks and the vision is greater than you and you know that it's going to require other visionaries or people who can get behind the vision to support it, to bring it to fruition, you kind of open yourself up to, there's a lot of exposure that can feel like vulnerability, and
Yes.
vulnerability is a requirement of growth, and if you're going to be loved, you have to take a chance on experiencing pain, and that is literally what vulnerability is, your capacity to to deal with pain, the pain that comes with being authentic and true to yourself. And so the goal for Honeybee Sage, even before we step foot in our first brick and mortar, was always to franchise, so that these little portals, pieces of heaven, were deposited all around the planet, not just the country, the planet, global community of homegrown healers. And when I share these things, I like to qualify them with the fact that they come in like the downloads come in moments of pause. I can be coming from a hike and hear global community of homegrown healers. I heard it one time, and if I hear something and it sticks, then I'm like, write that down, because that came from somewhere, another dimension. And so I said all that to say, I've been questioning the vision lately. Like, girl, you've done this, it's great. Like, can we let's just be a great store in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on King Drive? Why do you have to plant many of these around the world? And I'm like, I have to ask myself, I have the option to stay here and dream about what that could be, or to actually
Sure.
go. Have you read The Alchemist? One of my favorite books. So the crystal shop owner, right? He always dreamed of Mecca. He always wanted to go. And, Santiago's like, hey, you can go. Like, let's go. And he's like, no, I just want to hold the dream. That feels better to me than the actual manifestation of it. And so I think I have the option. We all have the option when we come to these forks in the road to say, well, this is it. This is good enough. I'm just going to land here. But every time I get there, Santiago was the same way. He got to the crystal shop, and before he, and he's like, well, I'm just going to buy my sheep again and I'm going to go back out. And then he's like, no, I'm going to stay at this crystal shop and I'm going to work. And I'm just going to stay here. And he's like, no, I'm gonna buy my sheep and I'm gonna go back out. And he's like, no. He got money and he went to buy his ticket to go on a caravan. And then every level, there was a plateau where he's like, he has the decision, the road less traveled, right? Which way are you gonna take? And my dream is to help facilitate, curate these spaces around the planet, right? Where Black and brown people, forgotten people, marginalized population, like, have access to this level of curation that this is done, especially for you to be able to access it, but also beyond that, global community. It is created as a space for all people to gather and experience the beauty of one another without all the things that we've been taught to allow to divide us. So I would love to create a garden, social garden and market in a lot adjacent to Honeybee Sage. We've already opened a second location where we are transitioning from a grab and go model because that's just not us. We tried it. We thought it was going to be cool because we were in the Marshall building. We thought we'd just serve the beautiful people there, but we are an experience. We are a destination. We curate space. And so that's what we're going to do, teaching classes there. But ultimately, the goal is to create a model that can be replicated throughout the globe. That's what honeybees do. They go where the land is barren and they pollinate it and they make beautiful things come to life. Yeah.
Oh, I love the way you just ended with that. Honestly, I had been thinking about honey because of the tea service itself. But that's exactly right. That's what honeybees do. They pollinate the earth. And they give us all of the flowers and the fruit. And I mean, just what a beautiful vision.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's honeybee sage. A lot of people, honeybees can be romanticized. You see honeybee stuff everywhere, and you come in our store and people think they're going to come and get honeybee trinkets, and we're probably going to carry more of those things, in the future. But it's about the ankh, right? Is in the logo in here, and it's an ancient Egyptian symbol, and this represents the female principle, so the womb. This represents the fallopian tubes, where the egg and the seed meet, and then this is the phallus, the male principle, and they come together to create life. And they are eusocial creatures. They're focused on, the worker bees are mostly all women or female, and they work themselves to death to make sure that the next generation can live and do and be as they've always been pollinators. They're called messengers of love, affectionately, because they pollinate the earth. And so for me, the love of honeybees is not about the honey that they produce, even though that's a beautiful byproduct. It is the way that they engage in community, and all parts are necessary. I would say there's a queen, there's no king, and that, my ego early on was like, but then I learned that a queen cannot reproduce herself without a male.
Right, exactly.
So
as much as we might like to.
Yeah, no, we got like the worker bees are asexual and they can create male bees, but the queen, who actually is reverenced in the hive for the life that she gives, she has to work with everybody. She needs the worker bees to take care of her, to take care of her babies. She needs the male bee to help her impregnate her with the babies. They all need each other. So such is life.
God, you're so great. This is so great. This podcast series explores creativity in all of its different facets, but the conversations I get to have with other entrepreneurs are some of my absolute favorite, because I just think you're so inspiring to me, and I'm so excited about how far you've come, and I cannot wait to travel the globe and see Honeybee Sage Wellness all over the globe. And that will happen because you are saying it into truth. And so that'll is.
Thank you. And you can say that we built this together. For me, that's the thing, right? You asked me how our community has contributed. There's no way that I could have this beautiful vision of community without engaging community to build or to manifest the vision, right? We've all the energy that folks feel when they come in, the energy that they share in the words that they speak. All of that, I feel like, is the momentum that helps propel Honeybee Sage into its next level. So I never feel like, I'm just doing all this hard work myself. No, I am a steward of a vision and of a community that we've all created together. That is, leadership through stewardship. That is my role. That's the role that I'm humbled to receive and to take in this vision.
Well, keep going and growing. You're absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on the program today.
Absolutely. This has been beautiful. Thank you.